But yeah, before we even get started, for real, how is everyone? When I say everyone, I mean particularly my special guests, Eliza and Elizabeth. But like, how are y'all? How's life for the past couple of weeks? How's life in COVID? You know, how are you thinking about things, so on and so forth. And you guys can just jump in whenever.
I like was already talking like a little bit. I'm just like a little like stressed in terms of like keeping the Asian American community like accountable. Like what does that look like as like the president of like ASA for the next year? But like in terms of just like as like a person, like I like cannot do like direct actions right now because like my asthma, COVID, there's just like a lot of things. But I think it's like a weird like space of like feeling like I am like helpless and like being frustrated with that. So like trying to figure out different ways that I like can contribute material support, all of these things. But other than that, I've been trying to find peace, and I hope you guys are too.
I just want to say hi, everyone. It's so good to see everyone. Like, wow. So how am I doing? I it's so complicated, right? It's so heavy, but recognizing that I'm not carrying a lot of the heaviness in relation to so many other folks who are. I recently had a conversation yesterday regarding how, although you could be taking collective action, i.e. like donating and reading literature and putting your body out in these protests, also recognizing the importance of like individual action. Like one of my friends just felt really disconnected from so many other friends who might not be Black folks, and how I think that reminded me of how I wasn't being as individually invested as I should be because I was focusing on being collectively invested, but recognizing that the healing isn't just like from a collective like point of view, but recognizing, folks who may know. So I've been more active and like trying to at least knock on the door. And if folks want to let me in, they can, but if not, then, at least I knocked on the door. I work for Latinx think tank, where we focus a lot on policy and bringing forward that policy to elected officials to bring about change. And we're also thinking through ways in which we could hold ourselves more accountable and be there for folks. Thanks for having me.
Sorry, I think I muted you toward the end. And
I was just saying, thanks for having me, Corey.
No, I thank you for being here. Like it's just an honor to have you all here. And so like with that kind of in mind, this talk or these series of talks have been primarily on photography. I want to continue to talk about photography, but I also want to find ways to pivot and talk about things outside of the art. And I thought like this is a time to do just that kind of. So in thinking about recent events and like the art form, I was kind of, one of the questions I had was like, how do you guys think about ethics in as it relates to the art form, and just like ethics in general and ethics as it specifically relates to like photography? So yeah, this kind of a conversation starter. If that's too hard or whatever, we can regroup. But yeah, it's kind of what my first question and the direction I want to go in. You unmute yourself. I'm not going to touch the mute buttons anymore.
Okay. I was like, oh wow, like Corey's really wants me to talk on this. Sure. This is really complicated, and I don't know if there's an answer to it that's quite universal or uniform. I talk about this a lot with other of my friends who photograph. Recently one of my friends, he's Indian and he went to India and he was like photographing in a very common market, and near the end of it he was like being yelled at by merchants and by folks there, and we're like, stop, go, like trying to like take the camera from him. And I think it's because like they have been accustomed to like being nothing but subjects of a photo and nothing more. I think that there is a privilege in being able to tell a story, and especially tell a story that isn't yours. And it's really hard to do justice by folks, and it's almost impossible to fully know like the history of each person. And I think that that's really difficult. So, um, I don't do street photography. I don't capture folks who are just sitting or, talking and interacting. I did it for a bit in Mexico when I was visiting my mother's hometown. Um, and even then, there's sometimes a thoughtlessness when it comes to like just capturing moments. Sometimes like when you're doing street photography, and that can be dangerous because I think the intentionality and the purpose and the thought should be involved. But at the end of the day, when you release your photography, although you may be putting a lot of effort and intention and thinking through how you're going to capture subjects, ultimately, like part of the art is letting it go and letting folks who are going to be witnessing your art to then understand that in the way that they do. And so realizing that there's a lack of control there either way. So it's difficult.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the questions that like I ask like also like my friends that do photos is like why they feel the need to like document like maybe like whether it be like stranger, they're just like walking down the street and they just like want to like, or like they like see like this like crowd, they think it's interesting, but like what is like compelling you to like actually take this photo? Some people it's just truly just like, oh, I thought it was pretty. But I like have like come across people that are like, oh, I think it tells a story, and like I like want to tell it, and it's kind of, I think like for me like projecting like a certain narrative on this like group of people that you have no idea what they're doing, and that's really harmful. And so like I also don't do street photography, but I like had this conversation with MJ. If you guys like know, she's like a really really good professor. I like took her black and white photography class that Corey also took. Um,
She's always on the calls, like.
yeah, but like we were having this conversation one day about like art and like community building, and like I like have found like the most, I think, like fulfillment through like taking photos with people that I either like already have like a deep connection with, and like we can like understand this art like mutually, like what does it mean to both of us, and then also like if it is like a stranger, like how do I like approach them, ask if I can take their photo, and then end up like giving them a space if they want to kind of like talk a little bit, maybe like what they're doing, and like try to do that relationship building, which I think that one is a lot harder to do and a lot more scary, especially as a person like me that is terrified of talking. But I think like the art like becomes like more fulfilling and like does have a deeper meaning when you do have a relationship with whoever you're like photographing.
No, yeah. I think that's super like those both are super like great points. One of the things I think about a lot now that I didn't think about when I came into Duke is like positionality in photography. So I think about like my positionality so I did a shoot with McDougal, and a lot of this people in McDougal, and like after this like question, I'll have you guys show your pictures and things, and you'll see the pictures from McDougal. But like talking to people who are in situations of like vulnerability has had me make like really stark considerations and considerations I've never seen myself making prior to like this era. But also I'm super aware of my positionality just like as an oppressed person as well. So I used to shoot for the Ninth Street Journal, right? And so one of the assignments I had was to go to a schoolyard and shoot like it was COVID relief, but it was right before they had just like canceled. So school was still in session, but people didn't know what to do. So they asked me to go shoot on campus, on the school's campus, to see what's going on. And so I get there and immediately I'm uncomfortable because it's like I'm this 22-year-old Black man taking pictures of kids outside of a school. And it's just like, before I even knew it, I had parents walking up to me and things like that. And so I'm thinking about positionality in terms of the subject. And then I get on campus or I get to the schools and now I'm confronted with positionality in like terms of the artist as well. And so like when we're talking about how do you all think about like positionality, your positionality as well as the positionality of the subjects when you're taking photos, whether that's documentary or street? I know you said you don't take street photography, but yeah.
Are these questions only directed to me and
Yes, you
Elizabeth?
guys are my special guests. And like, I mean, we'll have time for everybody else to talk a little bit, ask questions, but like these are really questions directed at y'all too.
Yeah. So positionality, that's such an important point, Corey. Absolutely. I think, yeah, positionality in not only like physically how like cognizant I am of how I look, like I am fair skinned, I am Latina, I speak the way that I do. I got told my first year at Duke that I look Mexican, but I don't speak it.
Mm.
So recognizing that that makes me an outsider to a degree to my community, because I've in some ways like adopted a language that is like one that I've been able to adopt by coming from a place like Duke. And so thinking through like why is it that I would be photographing like members of my community, because I think the things that I have been wanting to photograph and do photograph are folks in my community, right? Like I want to do a series on street vendors, specifically in Los Angeles, like the geography of Los Angeles. And reconciling with that too, so I work at UCLA, a university, and I was like working late, and then I had a security guard come up to me, and it was the first time that I had someone not believe me when I told them who I was, which is already so much privilege. But recognizing that the geography of Los Angeles is one where like the majority of us are Latino, and we're like the one of the largest Spanish speaking cities in the nation after Mexico City. We're the second largest. And that influenced how it is that the security guard viewed me to a degree. And, you know, I wanted to do a series on fruit vendors in Los Angeles, who have them on the street, carretas, and they sell fruit. But recognizing like, is that, how self-serving is that? And like, why am I photographing these folks? And recognizing, just like understanding that again, that there's a lack of control once it's beyond me. But you know, how is it that they do view me as, you know, a fair-skinned person? And so constantly having to reckon with like my positionality is really important, Corey. Absolutely agree. Because there's a lot of power there, and like how am I abusing that power if I am? And even like the DSLR that I'm carrying, like, oh my gosh, right? You know, which is why I think like the iPhone, and that's why I'm currently in this pandemic, like FaceTime portraits, like that's so powerful to a degree, because it's like making photography even more accessible, and it's welcoming that accessibility. And documentation, that's important, because documentation is important, but I'll stop there. Elizabeth, all you.
Yeah. I think in terms of like photos, like me as like an Asian American woman I think it's like a privilege, right? Or like I haven't necessarily been, I think like profiled, at least like to my face. But there like was a situation, like I like also do like video. And like I was doing like one of like the Duke men's basketball games, and there was just like, I'm sorry, but the like white people, like the alumni that like buy these like really pricey tickets, and then like I don't know, they like feel like some like weird ownership over the stadium. And so like I was backstage, and I had like a ton of like old white men be like, what are you doing here? Even though I like very visibly like had a media pass, like I like had my camera, like they like knew what I was doing there. So it's just like this like weird, like I think particularly in video is such like a white man like type of field that like even like people like still like can't like grasp the fact that like I as like a 5'2" like Asian woman can like also like be doing this work. In terms of like photos, like I will admit like I have not really challenged myself, I think, to go beyond like my like very close friends when it comes to taking photos. And so like I haven't had to like grapple with identity, because a lot of the people that I'm taking photos with are of my same identity. I will say there's like a like project that I've like wanted to do for a really long time. Like I come from like for like a pretty long time of just like Chinese from like the Mississippi Delta. And so like me and my sister have like really, really wanted to do this project with like Mississippi, like Memphis, like I'm from Memphis, kind of just like along the delta of like these like Chinese folks. It's like a really, really deep history. But I think it's also really hard in that like I like no longer like really identify with like Christianity, and like the church like the Chinatown for like a lot of these folks growing up in the Delta. And so like how do I like tell a story that like I want to tell but is rooted in Christianity for a lot of these people that like I don't want to frame in the same way. So I think it's kind of like that like contrast of like I want to tell this story like a different way than like maybe the that I am like documenting, and like how do I grapple with that?
I'm on mute. So I'm gonna hop over into screen share, and what I'm doing is I'm giving both of you all co-host abilities so that you all can hop into screen share as well. I did ask for you all to have some pictures at the ready to show the people. And so I'm gonna start just because I want to give you guys time to bring them up. When you all were talking, it made me think about a few things. So can you let me know when you guys can see what I see? Um, can you see what I see?
No.
What can
Now
you?
I can.
You
I
can?
can now see.
Okay.
Yes.
So a couple of months ago, or last semester on campus, right after the McDougal terror stuff happened, I did a project for the CDS that was focused around McDougal, and so here are some of the pictures that I was taking during that time. And so the woman that you see now, her name is Miss Shimmy, and she was one of the people who were displaced. And so we walked through her apartment as well as her hotel room just to get an idea of like what her living situation was. And so some of the things this made me think about, like when you guys were talking, one of the things I thought about that was even if you share identities with the people you're taking pictures with, there's still a separation there that you need to consider. And so like I'm showing these pictures, but I'm also acknowledging the extreme privilege I had just being able to come into her space and like take these pictures, because she allowed me into her hotel room and into her apartment and things. But like even now there is a nagging feeling of like guilt associated with just the way I like going into her space and taking pictures of her in a way like this for something as I'm not going to say as measly, but for something like a school project, right? And so it makes me want to make sure that the project that I had is seen by more than just people in that class, but it's done for more than just a grade, right? And so I'm gonna switch over. I'm gonna take it off screen share and let you guys screen share. But I was wondering, kind of, have you, when taking pictures of people who might be your same identity but might be in a different socioeconomic status or SES, how do you guys go about that? How do you think about it and things like that? So I'll kind of start with Elizabeth and see, and then we'll go to Eliza. And like the pictures and like answer to the question can be like two separate things. Like it doesn't have to be.
I'll do the questions first because my photos for some reason are not loading, so I will do that while I'm talking. I think I'm still grappling with this, mostly just because like this like project hasn't like happened. Like I haven't been at home long enough to be able to do kind of like this like road trip. But I think like I'm like also like vaguely related with like a lot of these families in some way or fashion. And so like I think for me like it's a lot of like I like have to start healing, I think, with like a lot of the families that I think like hurt me like in the church. And like that requires like a lot of like emotional like overhaul. But because I think it's like different for me than like Eliza's in that like I did have a connection with these people and then I broke it. And so like there's like maybe even like a narrative of like what that healing looks like. Especially when there's just like such like a big difference both in like generation, like how they were raised. Because I think like especially for people like my dad, and like the people that he grew up with, like my dad was like the first Chinese person like in his high school, and the rest of them were like his siblings, right? And so I think like they grew up in like a time where like it was like very like it was like very you had to really really repress the kind of like Asian identity of yourself and like assimilate to whiteness. And so I think a lot of that trauma is like still there, whereas like I've grown up I think like being very open with like my Asian identity and trying to find ways to kind of like reject whiteness. So like it's going to be hard when you are trying to tell like that community that like they need to heal, but they don't think that they need to heal. I don't know if that like really answered it, but that's just kind of like my like process that I'm thinking through.
I said no, definitely. And did you still have? Are your pictures still loading?
In like 3 seconds, maybe? No, maybe longer than that. Eliza, if you want to talk first while these are loading, that'd be great.
Yes. So I'll start by showing my pictures. Okay, let me share my screen. All right. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, so cool. So I'm going to start with some of the photographs that I took during my time at the bridge, because it was such an honor to be able to photograph and work with so many talented, creative folks of color. And this was for a series around like Afro-Latinx identity and the Latinx and Black community and the nuances that are found within those communities. I think why I love some of these photographs so much is not only because it regards an issue that I find to be very close to me, and in that way it didn't feel as if I was like placing myself in a position that I didn't fully understand. And also because I knew these folks, like I was in classes with these people, I was friends with them, and so there isn't that close of an ethical dilemma. There's more of a permission, and I think that permission is really important. So this is of Simone. I think the gaze here, it like only then solidifies that it's very much like permission is there. So one of Simone here, one of Jorge here. This is when there's no gaze, but I decided to show it because Amir is, one of my good friends. And so, in a way it was just, I think in documentation, there's also like a celebration. And I wanted to end with two. One is like one that I took of myself that I then edited and like made it to look like this. Because I think that if anything, like when I was particularly actually like really delving into the ethics of photography, when I was in Detroit, I was like, wanted to do photography, but I didn't know how to tackle it. And talking to friends and realizing like you are always a subject. You can always be a subject. Like you are, if anything, like there is no ethical quandary there, right? There might be still, but there's definitely less of one. And there's so many series out there by incredible folks who have done photography where they very much are like the center of their work, and it's powerful, and there's like a story being told. And then recently I've been doing like FaceTime portraits of friends. This is my friend Sid. He's releasing a few songs like in a few weeks, and he asked me if I could do some photography so that they could help promote their art. And there's nothing like FaceTime portraits. It's like, and there's an intimacy involved because I'm in his personal space, but I'm very much like on this other side of the screen. And there's still that distance. And so there's nothing that's like quite permissible as like FaceTime portraits, because it's like, can you show me around your room? And like, they very much are as they're very much there just as I am there. So my second.
Can I ask a question real quickly, or do I need to wait?
Go for it. Ask a question.
With your FaceTime self-portraits, or not self-portraits, your FaceTime portraits, are you taking it with a screenshot, or are you using your camera? You took it with a screenshot.
No, so I was like, I tried two things. I've tried Zoom and I've tried FaceTime. FaceTime is definitely better because even if it comes off as, so there's a feature that you have to like enable to like have live photos. So these are actually live photos, which is cool because you can also do some really cool things with movement if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But they have to have it enabled as well, like live photos enabled. And that way you can just like, there's a little photo and you're not in the photo if you capture it. It's just them and it's a live photo. I'll send over details after because it's
No,
cool and everyone should try it. Yeah.
Okay.
please do. And I have a question. We're gonna put a pin in that because I do want to see Elizabeth's pictures. But I do have a question kind of around like the permissibility of Facebook pictures and FaceTime photos and things like that. But Elizabeth, do you have your pictures?
Yeah, I can pull them up real quick.
Cool.
Yeah, so mine are like a very like weird mix, both I think of like street photography kind of because I was in New York and like because I did Duke in New York last summer. I don't know if you guys like ended up doing it too. But it's like New York, it's like the thing to do, and I was leaning into it. But then like the rest are just either like portraits, like like what's the word? I don't know, like portraits that were like very intentional, or they were just like me with my friends, or like black and white photos that I took for class. So yeah, you guys might recognize some people, maybe. Not sure. Is this working?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yes.
So this one, I've been like on ASA board I was in junior because I went abroad, but this is like at the end of sophomore year, and we were having like our end of year dinner. And it was just like something about the light and like the way everyone is positioned, I thought was like really fun. And then Grace right here, I don't know if you guys know Grace Shen. She is probably like the like biggest, she loves the camera, and we have a joke that like every time I take a photo she's always looking at me. So like I like really love this photo, I think just because it's like very sentimental to me. These are like the Bryant Park photos. I think with Bryant Park in particular, I don't know if you guys have been, it was really fun playing with like both like architecture and then all of the trees everywhere and then all the symmetry. So like all of these here like very much like I think I really love kind of like the like two women sitting and
Is it me or did she freeze?
I think she froze.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give her like 2 more seconds. Okay, there we go. Liz, you froze for a second while you were
yeah,
talking
and I
about
just went out.
Bryant Park.
Heck
But you froze on a beautiful photo.
Hold
It's
on.
okay.
You did.
Agreed. Very beautiful photo.
It's loading very slowly. Here we go. Okay. Here's another one from Bryant Park. Once again, like I was really loved like playing with the lines and the way that like this woman right here at the backpack was like kind of positioned. Also, New York Bryant Park is like in such a busy area that a lot of working people come here to rest, and I thought that was really interesting, and that there was just like so many people, but like no one was actually interacting with each other. This one I think is the funniest one, mostly because if you zoom in, he's actually like he's not okay. But I thought that like I think this is the one that like I think like reminded me most of like the jungle, because I know like New York is like like the concrete jungle all those ideas. And it's like this one is because he's just vibing, he's just opening his canteen. And then also this one right here, which is like the stage that a lot of people perform at. So like once again, I think this one was like the most like obvious one with like there were a ton of people, but no one was actually interacting with each other. And like what does that mean in like a city like New York where like there's just so many people, but like how many, like what kind of like interactions, like communities are like actually forming here. Cool. Okay, so we're at the black and white photos now. I don't know if you guys know Michelle Lee. We like were having like an ASA meeting like at the gardens, and like I had a black and white photo assignment too, so I was like, I just want to take photos of you. So here are a few. This one is with my friend Annie. We were on the UNC Robertson bus to go get boba. And then this one, I think this is when I started to lean more into like documenting friends. We went to go get dim sum. This is like Tyler, if you guys know Tyler Leanne. But my like favorite part was like this like boy back here, just like trying to figure out like what was going on with all the food. So I think the black and white photography class like really helped me, I think, lean into more like observing rather than just like doing like portraits that I had like preconceived. This was at the UNC game. No. PCHX. I like black tinted sophomore year. Everyone knows the Gussie's truck. I was just like playing around with light. And now we're back to New York. So this is Central Park. I really, really love this one, mostly just because like you can see like there's like the couple over here that's taking their wedding photos. I like hated the exposure difference at first, but I like have started to like lean into it a little bit. I think it's really fun. And then this one is also one of my favorites. This is also like Central Park, and it was like he was like two grandparents, the two grandkids, and like he was like trying to get one of the grandkids to dance with one of the street performers. The kid was not having it.
These compositions are crazy.
Thank you. Now we're at the grad photos. These are my friends Ada and Henry. I miss the BC Plaza. I don't miss Duke, but I miss the BC Plaza. And they were like very intentional about taking their grad photos here, which I thought was really special. And then you guys know Lizette. She also graduated last year. This is my first champagne shot. I was terrified. Actually turned it out really well. And this is the last one. This is of both Tyler and Grace. I know you guys like Asian American Studies Working Group. We did our first zine this year, and the topic was like on bodies. So what does that mean, like under capitalism, like commodified bodies? So I wrote this piece. Well, I made this piece in the kind of like excerpt of like the written portion is mostly just like, what does it mean to be a commodified body under capitalism, and like how do we rest and like communal care, and like thinking about all of the people that have like given me the language to verbalize how I feel and how to rest. So that is my very quick 10 photos.
No, and I really appreciate you showing.
Beautiful.
Those are all great. Something I saw in both of y'all's in your slates of photos, as well as something I feel like I do in my photos, is like this idea of being within somebody's personal space, right? And so like there's a personal, like even your street photography, Elizabeth, there was a real personal quality to the way that you were taking the guy in the jungle or the woman sitting down. Like even though you were physically distanced from them, I felt like you were in their personal space. And in a similar way with Eliza's photos, like you're literally in somebody's room when they're taking a FaceTime photo. And so like, how do you guys navigate being in that personal space with somebody and photographing in that personal space? Or how do you think about personal space or the permissibility of that as you're as you're taking pictures? Feel free to think about it some. If the question doesn't make sense, also feel free to call that out as well.
Hildana, it's great to see your face.
Yeah, man.
Could you like rephrase it like one more time?
Yeah. Okay. We talk about there's a personal quality to all you all's photos, and when you're thinking about, do you think about photography differently when you're thinking about photographing people in like their personal space, quote unquote? And so like, for example, when I went to shoot Miss Shimmy, because I was in her literal home, there was a real care with which I was walking around. Like I felt like I was kind of on thin ice in the way that I was traversing through her home and taking pictures. I asked her before I took pictures of like her walls, she would open a closet and I would ask to take the picture in the closet in a way that I wouldn't if I was just like in the loo taking pictures of friends or, just out taking pictures, right? And so my question is like, do you navigate people's personal space differently? When you're like Eliza, when you're thinking about those FaceTime pictures, is there a special way you're thinking about it because you're in somebody's personal space? Elizabeth, when you're on the street taking pictures of people by themselves, is there a special way you're thinking about it because you're in somebody's personal space? And so that's kind of, and like, yeah.
I might be head empty, no thoughts on this one.
No worries.
I'm trying to think.
In terms of, I think for me, it's like just the acknowledgement of it to start. Just like acknowledging, like I'm like FaceTime portraits, what a time. I'm very much, it's, the dynamic is very funny. Like I'm in your space and I'm getting a tour of your bedroom, places that you like to sit in. And there was one time, so just this past weekend, I was photographing my friend Sid, but this music release is with another person I don't know, I have never met. So I was like, hi, I'm going to be taking FaceTime portraits of you. It's nice to meet you. And it was like a pretty unique position to be in. And I think it almost demands like a type of like intimate introduction that is especially unique in a time like this, where like meeting new folks and like making those relationships and friendships is very difficult to do, especially new ones given this time, which is why I think I appreciate the idea of FaceTime portraits, and how those can even be done with people that you're just getting to know, because but of course always being like conscious of positionality as well, Corey, is really important. And so yeah, I think just reconciling with the fact that like I'm in their personal space, but at the same time there's a sense of control. Like they're the ones that are holding the phone, they're the ones that are like holding the laptop showing me around. Like they can choose what they will show, like they can decide what room they want to be photographed in. You know, even when I direct them, like can you like lean the phone a little, like tilt it more forward, like to a degree they're also directing themselves, and they can see how they're being viewed and portrayed, which I think is kind of empowering, because it's like, I think the fear of being photographed by so many others is like, you don't know who's behind the viewfinder, right? You don't know what they're saying, you don't know how they're viewing you, but like being able to be given that type of control back, I think is really cool about FaceTime portraits.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I like while you were talking, I was thinking about particularly the photo with like Tyler and Grace. I think there was like, so like first of all, like drawing that line took forever. It was like red lipstick, like it's the worst thing I've ever done. But we like tried to like practice like posing. Like Tyler is like what, like 6-something feet tall, and like Grace is like 5'3", and so like trying to position them was also really difficult. And so there was a lot of like behind the scenes positioning inside of our dorms before we went outside. And so like there was like one day where we were like in like my room, and like I could tell they were like really, really uncomfortable. And I was like starting to think about this, and I was like, I think I would prefer being in somebody else's space where they are comfortable versus like taking a photo of someone in my space and they're uncomfortable, because I'd rather my subject be more confident in like what's happening than I am, because I think I can at least like control like what I like am like perceiving, like what am I like doing in like my own actions. And I think like the whole like thing, like I like want my subjects to be like okay before I am when I'm like photographing.
That's real. That's real. And that kind of goes into the next thing I was kind of thinking about talking about. So when I pick up when I pick up a camera, I'm looking through the viewfinder. Every time I pick up a camera, I feel like this overwhelming sense of responsibility, and like among other things, among joy and like, you know, curiosity. Like especially when I'm going into places like Google or things like that, I feel this overwhelming sense of just like I feel this weight of responsibility. And I'm wondering, like, I don't know if that's because it's just the way I take pictures, or if it's because I have training in documentary work, or if it's, you know, if that responsibility is inherent to the art. And so I kind of wanted to shift that question to y'all. Is like, do you feel a similar way? And if so, do you think that there's like a responsibility that's inherent to anybody who holds a lens in their hands, right? So yeah.
That's tricky because phones,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everyone has a camera that they have access to. And in many ways, there is that constant sense of invasion that you very much have, like just by holding a phone. Granted, we've seen how phones could be devices to prove like evidence. And we're seeing that now more than ever, right? Like how photography can be evidence, photography can be more than just art and depicting subjects. But I'm constantly thinking of what I'm choosing to photograph with my phone. And I think that's why my head have made a division between like things I choose to take with my phone versus things I choose to take with my DSLR. And like definitely like pinkies up, there's like also that difference that I need to reconcile. But for me, it's like there's a sense of like constantly digitizing a moment like via phone, right? That like in some way you are not letting that moment, that person be in its being. You're very much disrupting it by like choosing to take a photo of it. Is like a theory, right? It's like an idea is with phones. And I think for me, you know, especially like thinking through the distribution of an image as well, like on social media, what is the purpose? Like, is this virtue signaling? Is this just me being like, hey, like, this is me just signaling my virtues and my values? Or like, is there more purpose to the images that you're choosing to share? And who is going to be viewing these images? I think the phone complicates that question, Corey, because we all have the power to photograph and to capture. And it's tough because there is a responsibility there, I'd like to think, but it's not as if like you can ask every person to take that on. Because I think that a consciousness and thought is important when photographing folks. And so then like, what's the responsibility of the viewer, right? Too. I think that there should be like a mutual sense of responsibility, because once it's out of the hands of the photographer, then art in many ways is how we choose to view it and understand it. And recognizing that it all lives within a context too, like we can't isolate photographs. And even like the art that stands to this day that like we see in museums, like they stand because they are critics and observers of their context. The minute you try to remove something from what it's a part of, it loses so much meaning. So mutual responsibility there. Heavy question, Corey. But also like at some point love to hear what everyone else thinks on this call too, because I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I agree. I also quite literally have no thoughts on this one, because I think you kind of summed up what I was thinking already. But yeah, if anyone else has like thoughts on this particularly, as like, I don't know, like if you guys are like photographers or if you're just like viewers, or like what does that look like for you guys too?
Everybody on this call is an artist in their own right. You know?
I was like looking at all of you, and I was like, you're all so talented.
Everybody got artistic talents is in my view. So yeah, like, do y'all think there's a responsibility with creating, and that comes with like for those of you who are photographers and holding a camera, for those of you who create like digital media and things like that, like where do you think that responsibility lies? Or do you think there's a responsibility at all? Yeah.
For clarity, do you mean like our responsibility to who?
Like I feel like to the world, to the cause, to whatever it is, to this greater thing that we're all trying to make better, right? Like I can say I feel this responsibility. When I say I feel responsibility, I default to Black people, but like that's because that's where my responsibility lies in a lot of like my context, right? But the responsibility that Elizabeth or Eliza feels or that you feel might be completely different, right? And so yeah, it's just an open question.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about the responsibility I have to other artists, and then also to providing the public with information, especially because I've been doing a lot of collage work lately. Have done collage work for a while, but never really shared it out of wanting to make sure that the original images that I used, that I respected the artist who created those images, but also respected myself as a person who created something new. And so the compromise I came to was that I always cite my original images. And that's something that actually a lot of people don't do. They either choose to use images that, are copyright free or are in public domain, so they don't have to do that or whatever. But just thinking about, one, a lot of the original images that I'm using come from the art books that I own and the textbooks that I own. And so I see these citations as a way to give people more access to more information, to more artists, to more people. But also, of course, always making sure to give credit where credit is due, since all of us are inspired by someone else, use ideas from other people. And it's not to say that our ideas aren't our own, but, to make sure we understand things come from other people and stuff like that. But that's what I've been thinking about as far as my responsibility lately.
Okay, I have some thoughts. First, I want to say thank you to everyone here. Like, y'all are so incredible to watch, and thank you for sharing your artistry with us here. I think what you're asking is a really good question. And for me, I don't consider myself like an artist. I think we all create in some way. So I'm not gonna like say like I don't create anything, but it's like a different relationship to it. But I think artists, the way I think about it is that artists have a responsibility to be true. And so either to be true to what you have decided and have true to yourself and true to the work that you're doing. And so if you are a documentarian and you tell the truth, then you should always tell the truth in the work when you're doing that documentary work, not that you have to be limited to that scope, right? Or if you decide that your art in some way critiques whatever society very intentionally, maybe you do satire cartoons or whatever, and I think there's a responsibility to always do your best in that work and be true to that. So whether it means being completely honest, whether it means making sure if you're doing a documentary there's all sides, or you're really capturing the story, right? And it's not about you, and you're able to remove yourself in that. Now, I do still think that there's always a ways in which the artist does really very much interact with their work, and so that's really hard to separate. But yeah, I say being true to that work, whatever that is for you.
It actually makes me think of a question what you said, Hildana, about a responsibility to the truth. A question for you all in doing, documentary film and photography. How do you make sure to convey to the audience that, because I think about like supplemental things such as, a documentary photograph along with an article or something allows for the space to cite, to give contextual information, the sort of things that a photograph alone doesn't have. So do you think of other ways, or do you even think of it at all about how to like make sure that your audience understands the truth that you're trying to convey? Does that make sense?
For me personally, I can't speak to anybody else. I make sure never to show my photos without some kind of context. And so like whether that's like I don't show it without talking about them. I don't show about them without a lengthy caption, or like especially their photos that don't like my McDougal thing. You won't see me post McDougal stuff on Instagram and with a one sentence caption or whatever. Like it's just because that's not where it lives. It's not where it's supposed to be. But when I do show it, I'm in a space where I can explain fully what's going on, and I can give all the context that I need to. So I think yeah, it's just like respecting you. For me, it's respecting the photos I take and respecting the context in which they were taken, and making sure that those things are not divorced when they're being shown.
I have a question. First of all, Eliza and Elizabeth, your photos were beautiful. What Corey, what you just said about Instagram not being the right context, I get it, and I see why. But on the other hand, I also see like these platforms being the environment where people can push like their art and their photography, and especially in this day and age, like it's where you can understand what's happening around you and see like live time. And so I just wonder, in like an environment that we're saturated by imagery, and like Eliza pointed out, everyone has the phone. We're all empowered now. Like photography has been democratized in a sense, but oftentimes there's a lack of kind of awareness of one's responsibility when you're sharing photos, right? So I see some people using Instagram to share things that I think are very informative and powerful, and I see other people doing things that are less informative and less powerful, and I just wonder where it falls. Like sometimes I'm like, I only use Instagram to see art, and sometimes I'm like, man, I don't want to see any art on here. Like this isn't art, and I oscillate. I don't know what's right, and I just think in terms of like artistic output, there's so many ways to consume it now. It can almost be hard to like be scrutinous in how you consume it and what you're consuming, and vice versa, like what you're producing and what you're putting out there for people, and how you give the right context, like whether that's a caption, whether that's so for me, like when I travel, I don't take pictures of people anymore because I'm just afraid that I'm not going to do it in an appropriate way and share it in an appropriate way, knowing how I share photos, but I don't know what people.
So I have thoughts, but what do you all think?
By all means, Corey, take it away.
Nah, I'm here to facilitate conversation. But conversation to be facilitated. I'm glad to take the answer. No, I think we should think about Instagram as a tool more than anything else. And like there are certain tools that are right for certain things. Like I'm not going to use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail. And so I think when you're thinking, you have to use a tool accordingly. And so when I say I would, I'm not going to use the Instagram for my McDougal stuff, but I would easily use it for like the art of creation stuff or the confounding color stuff, because that work has a different tone and a different, like, it just has a different context, right? And so I think it's, what are the goals what is the thing you're trying to fix, or what are the goals you're trying to do, and what tool are you using to make those goals happen? And like Instagram's right for certain things, it's not right for the other things. But yeah, that's how I think about it. What about everybody else?
Thanks so much for sharing, Inez. Yeah, that's a tough thing. I oscillate too. There are moments where I produce artwork and I want it to be only for those who are close to me, because I trust that they can carry what I'm about to share. And then other times I want to share it more widely to a group, and I understand that the way that it will be met may be lacking nuance, because that's how Instagram in many ways, like even its algorithm isn't one that like promotes that. Hi, Joe. Okay. Even Instagram isn't a platform that promotes and welcomes that type of nuance and that encouragement, that conversation, that dialogue. But is tough because, as you said so yourself, like, but nonetheless, this is where we gain information nowadays. It's like very much the platform that we're using. It's really tough because I think currently I really just, sometimes it's really hard for me to separate like virtue signaling with like purpose and intention. And because at the end of the day, Instagram is a platform that like is algorithmic, and it's so dependent on like likes and like the way that even very much affects how it is that we feel. I question like whether or not we're all above Instagram, because there are some moments where I'm like, I'm above it. These likes don't sway me, and my self-perception and the perception of my art, even if I share my art, like how many likes does it get? Like, I still think that there is that like endorphin rush, there's that connection. And like, I think it's just acknowledging it and reconciling that like that's simply a part of the platform. And that platform is very much what we're dependent on, because I can't pretend like there can be a life without Instagram, because there can't. And like very much. So I think it's recognizing that it can't be everything, but it is something. And it's very much a platform that we reside in, that we live in. So
I kind of have a question, if that's okay, to what you were both kind of touching on, Ines and Eliza, because as you're talking about Instagram, it makes me think about the next generation of people and artists that come up who have been born within the time of Instagram and were never exposed to a time outside of it. And especially like, who knows what the world looks like post-COVID, right? And so a lot of some of you on this call who've had to move senior projects and final theses to virtual platforms, and museums that are working to make virtual access more widely available for art. How does that affect kind of the landscape and the way that the landscape of art, and does it change what art communicates? Since the medium it is something that causes you all some form of, thought and back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Great question. Yeah, great question. I think for me personally, I think about Medium as just another way to do what we've been doing. And so like now that we know that things are going to be virtual, there's a different way I'm thinking about things, right? So I'm thinking about my art in that, there's a possibility that anything that I put out might be seen by a lot more people than I expected to, or might be seen by people I don't expect it to. So like if I do something on campus and I do put something in the chapel or whatever, there's a group of people who are going to see it. and there's a group of people I expect to see it. When you put something online, somebody can stumble across it. That can be your next meme, right? And so like for me, it's creating art that is just has the ability to be much more widely consumable. And it's also thinking about art that lives better online, right? So like personally, visually speaking, there are some things that look better printed out, and there are some things that look better on the screen. And so when I'm taking pictures, I'm like, now knowing that most of my stuff is going to be on a screen, I'm putting that into the preliminary thoughts. Like I'm taking these pictures for screen use later, you know? So yeah, that's how I think about it.
I'm thinking a little bit about the museum aspect of your question, and I think about certain things are lost for sure. There's this article I've had to read in art history multiple times about, you lose the authenticity of a work by not being able to see it in person. And there's so many elements to works, whether they be, multimedia and the tactile, whatever, that seeing it in person, you lose that element. But I also think there's so much to be gained. Like my exhibition that I had planned for the Nasher was moved from an in-person gallery to the Nasher's website. And at first I was really disappointed because of course, like I get to have it in the museum, but the final project ended up being so much more than I could have made possible in the gallery. Because with it being, for example, with it being online, there were certain artworks about Black women specifically that harken back to like 19th century France. They're not in the Nasher's collection, so they never would have been able to have been seen with the works I was trying to talk about. But by it being online now, I was able to take the digital version of those works and put them in conversation. And I think the commentary I was trying to make was more direct than it could have been in the gallery, honestly, because I got access to things from all over the world that I wouldn't have in person. And I've attended a few museum events that have been on Zoom and like online and stuff. And I think what it does bring is an opportunity for us to make kinds of like all kinds of connections about work and about what artists are doing that are sometimes not feasible in person, whether it be, artwork is in a private collection and you'll never see it, but you can now see it digitally, or loans that couldn't have been possible because they're all over the world, like I said. So I think there definitely is something lost by not being able to see something in person. But what I've experienced personally is actually a bit more gained. I think loss, if you want to talk about it as a cultural institution, is different, but the actual consumption of artwork, I actually feel like a little bit more is gained because we get more access.
I think like agreeing with Ashley, like there's been like this like huge, like zines have kind of like always been a thing, but I think like recently they've kind of like been like really, really popularized, at least like at Duke. And I think zines, like both like you get to have the art and the statement and like links like you could like provide like for further resourcing, like all kind of like in that like one spot. And I think like a lot of people have been like, I think, forgetting like the like radical like political ideology behind like a lot of zines, like being like an art form that like was against like traditional newspapers and like magazines. And so like I like have found a lot of faith. I think agreeing with Ashley, like I found a lot of faith, I think, like in zines as like an art form, especially now. I know you guys like know like Helen Yang, she graduated last year also, but like she does like a lot of really good like zine work, and she's doing, and like I'm like we're doing 2 pieces right now. I'm helping one on like the carceral state, and then one about like being like what is like COVID like 19 like in the South look like. And so like trying to like have all of these things oriented around like COVID, what do these mean, and like how does this like show like the failures of like capitalism like right now. So like, and I think like these are really, really great knowledge building tools in like crowdsourcing that like you wouldn't necessarily get from like in person unless you like were like physically there. Whereas like this is like very easy to be like, I know like, no, you want to learn more about this. I've done this work. Here you go. Yeah.
Super cool. In an effort to keep this, to not waste not waste, but to not take too much of y'all's time, I have one more question for like the group, and that I've kind of I thought about a lot since like we started this conversation, and it's kind of gotten more salient to me as we kept talking. But it's this, we're in a time now where people want to know how you feel about a particular issue. So we're in a time where, you know, as as white people, we want to know that you're against, you know, the beating of Black people by police. We want to know where people fall on these issues. So we've been talking about virtue signaling a lot over the course of this conversation, and I'm wondering, one, what is is there value to virtue signaling, period, and or question mark, and if so, what is that value? And two, like, what does it look like to be a photographer in allyship, right? Like, can you perform allyship through photography? If so, how? Things like that. So they're two kind of separate questions, but like I think those are two things I'd like y'all to think about.
Can you define virtue signaling?
Yeah. So, and like, Eliza, feel free to hop in too, because you were talking about it a lot. But to me, virtue signaling is somebody letting you know that they feel a certain way about a certain issue. So if I get on to Twitter and I say, you know, F the police, you know, F12, I'm letting everybody in my Twitter feed know that I don't like the police. And so there's a performative aspect to it, but like, I'm wondering if there's value to it as well, and if so, when and how and why, you know.
I mean, if I were to answer that, Corey, I do think that I think that there is value to virtue signaling if it, and it depends on the person's influence. So obviously, like, a lot of times people will highlight if a celebrity does virtue signaling because that celebrity has, like, the reason they're a celebrity is because of their huge following. So if that inspires their followers to behave the same way, or to at the very least, like, think more critically about their own, like, personal beliefs, I think there is value in it. But as an artist who is virtue signaling, I think it's important to make sure that your voice is, like, known, your voice and your opinion, because, like, a lot of times people's, like, artwork can be used, like, in negative ways, right? Like, they can be used in ways that, like you've mentioned, that was never your intention. So it's important to have your voice be known with, like, and be affiliated with your artwork, so that there's always a defense if it's misused. But I do think there is value in virtue signaling, to answer your question.
Yeah, it's tough. I've been thinking a lot about that, especially during what's been happening. I've been thinking a lot about whether or not I should be posting on social media and how frequently, and the productivity of it. Also, productivity, you know, questionable, like what, you know, our obsession with productivity to begin with, and but I just, like, I'm constantly questioning the easy. Like, if something is too easy, then I should question it and be skeptical of it. And I think that sometimes, like, virtue signaling is important. I do think it is important. Like, there's a part of me that's like, okay, maybe I should post once and, like, put this hashtag on, because, like, algorithmically, it's, like, basically, like, the way that we decide how important something is like whether or not something is trending. And so there's a part of me that's like, okay, logistically, like, this is important. But then when thinking through, like, what kind of message am I trying to send out? Like, am I just doing this for the sake of, like, being patted on the back by, like, my peers, and, like, being like, okay, like, she's on the right side of things, and, like, but what am I doing? What am I really doing? And, like, how am I actively being engaged individually and collectively with peers? And I think recently too, it's been tough. I've been thinking a lot, because also, you know, recognizing that, like, as much as it's important to hold others accountable, how could I hold myself accountable? Like, I'm not going to start by saying, like, here are these resources that you should look into. I should first start by, like, thinking inward and think about, like, what work do I have to do? Because that's been tough. And so and I'm thinking about what you're saying, Inez, right? Because, like, ultimately this is the platform that we are becoming knowledgeable. Like, and so it's tough, because the sharing of facts and the sharing is important, but then, like, what I think I ultimately do think that sometimes like platforms like these are selfish inherently, and so I'm very cynical when it comes to social media, and I don't know, it's tough. I think it's tough, but I do think it's important also, as Malik or Malike, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name, was saying. I think it's still important, but there's nuance there.
I think like one quick thing, I don't know, you guys like know like Deja Wood. She's my year. I'm gonna be a senior. Reposted on Facebook. I forgot who like the original poster was, but it was like, oh, like if you're afraid to like virtue signal right now, like here's like why you shouldn't be. And like one of like the main points that I thought was like really great was talking about how like when you say you don't want to virtue signal, you're implying that like this thing is like a debatable truth. And it was in reference to like anti-blackness, and like anti-blackness is like not a debatable truth. Like it is like inherently wrong, right? But I think like between like what's virtue signaling and then what's like performative, because I would say like people who are like vegan, I'm sorry if you guys are vegans, but like vegans who like virtue signal and then look down particularly on like ethnic communities that like where like meat is like very like centered to like their culture, like things like that, I consider virtue signaling. But I think like in terms of like Black Lives Matter and like anti-blackness, like posting like a cute artsy graphic of somebody who's like literally been murdered, which that's a completely another conversation, but like I think like only posting that but then there is no action, I consider that performative. Because like for me it's like saying like Eliza was saying, like you need to be doing some sort of like action, like interpersonally, like structurally, or like I will consider that performative.
I've been wondering about this specifically for myself, what I should be doing right now, what my friends are doing. I chose to post stuff. I took the actions that I wanted to take, and I'm thinking about what is required beyond the immediate things I do. I chose to post stuff because I'm from London, and I knew a lot of my British friends hadn't really like seen the extent of what was happening or understand like the profundity of everything going on in this country, just because degree of distance. And a lot of them were like, "Wait, like I didn't understand like the extent, like hold on." So like that was informative in some ways, but I've got to be honest, I've seen a lot of people who I personally know do not engage critically with a lot of the issues that they're talking about. I see it as inherently performative. And I think the one thing is it's really easy to judge external action. It's much harder to judge internal action. And right now we are basing ourselves on the system where it's all about the external action. And oftentimes like that, that doesn't amount to anything. And like, that's the hard part. I agree. Like it is important to, like I've seen the phrase like silence is violence, right? If you don't push yourself and say what you believe in, who you support, like no one hears what you're saying. But at the same time, I fear so many people are saying things they don't even understand or believe in, but who am I to judge it?
Agreed.
I completely agree. Go for it, Ash.
Disregard she's on the phone back there. But what I was thinking about, because I've been thinking a lot about that too, and people posting things, and you probably have an inclination that they're not engaging critically with some of the things they're posting. Does that mean they shouldn't post it? Because thinking about algorithms and the pressure of, when something goes viral, like you can't not address it. And I grapple with that because I've seen people and have been honestly like triggered and frustrated at times seeing them post these things. But then I wonder, what would, if my timeline only consisted of the people that I knew in the past have critically engaged with it, like would we see the change or the growth? Or I don't know. And like, is there someone that's not critically engaging that may be encouraged to do so now because it started with the post and the people around them are like, okay, so what now? And I don't know. Is it should they not post if they don't critically engage? I don't know.
And to what you're saying, I'm gonna just jump right in, is also you kind of bring up the point of the distinction between the personal internal experience, growth, learning, awareness, and the influence that a public voice has. And so I think we can't deny that we live in an influencer culture, and we've always lived in one, right? Whether it was on Instagram or it was only I don't know, Katie Couric, who could be on TV, or whoever was running the 4 news channels back in whatever year, right? And so I think, and then it also makes me think about bystander effect for some reason, and I don't know kind of why I went there, but thinking about, I think there's a way in which when someone signals what their values are and what their positionality is in helping, in kind of, there's an influence in shaping the greater conversation. Now, whether it's rooted in something authentic or something that this individual has learned, who knows, right? But then how much does that matter, or how little does that matter when we're talking about systemic problems, where we are constantly saying it's not about how little or much you know, what are you doing to affect the system? And so how does that kind of show up similarly in our voices? Like, how much does it matter for your voice to be a part of a system or not? Because we know that it affects us, right? Like, I think just seeing the sheer number of posts this time around versus, like, I don't know, whenever the last time was, I was taken aback with how much it affected my mental health and just stress. I, like, honestly, I was like, wait, what? It's been 4 days and what's going on? I don't know how to think and how to feel. And so we know it has an influence and an impact. And I guess the conversation is like, how and where or what do we do with it, and when is there responsibility versus personal, I don't know, preference, choice? That was a bunch of questions, not really direct. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Like, I think everyone is bringing up such important points, and like already I feel like the way that I'm thinking through social media is already kind of shifting. But I think it is important, absolutely, to post, because it is very much how we determine like what is important. But is that still enough? I think for me, like in terms of like Elizabeth, your friend, bringing up like, is virtue signaling, like is reckoning with that, like, you know, this is truth and that's totally true, right? It's not a value, it's a truth to be shared. However, I think the danger with virtue signaling is that like it kind of stops there to a degree. Like you're signaling and that's enough, like that is it. And although this is important and although these conversations are important to be had, you know, there's also a certain type of hopelessness too that I think can be felt in terms of like, this has been happening for decades, centuries. And is social media and the posting enough to make sustainable change? And it's beginning, I'd like to think, but yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Thank you for everyone's insights.
Oh, definitely. And the way I think about it as well is I think we should think about it in steps, right? So like virtue signaling is the first step to whatever it is you should be doing, right? So like if someone were to ask me, how should I post or whatever, I would say do not post anything about, you know, any of the things that happens unless it's followed with a text to one of your friends of color that's like, hey, how are you doing right now? Or just like, it should come with an action within your physical space. And it's like, you don't, that action doesn't necessarily have to be you going out and holding up a sign or you throwing a rock through a window of somebody's police force. But like, even if it's just making sure the people around you are good, I think that like when we talk about the actions that come with these words, we talk about allyship. Like allyship is not only telling people that you're an ally, but it's availing yourself and making yourself available to those that you are in allyship to. And so if someone were to ask me, I would say, yeah, go post that black screen, but also reach out to your black friend, right? It's like you know, and hopefully in doing so, we're able to virtue signal and trying to create a community of people who are like messing with each other. But like, I think to Eliza's point, there's a very healthy cynicism. There's a very healthy to like all of this, because like I've seen hella people I know for facts don't mess with black people at all. And, you know, we're seeing black screens and things like that. And so I'm trying to figure out and reconcile how that I should feel about this person, right? And so, yeah, I think all of these things are things that we got to think through. And I think that photography, bringing it full circle, is a tool we can use to do it all. And so I'm I've been, very grateful for this conversation, and I'm very thankful that all of you all hopped on, because I think this was probably one of the richest conversations I've had on this show thus far. Um, yeah, my programming is done. I will be here to discuss these problems and issues with you for as long as you all want to, but my questioning is finished. And so if you have, for my special guest, if you have a website or a link that you want to drop for the people, please make sure to drop it in the comments. Thank you so much for coming and talking and being awesome. To everyone else, thank you so much for coming and talking and being awesome. I'm so grateful for all of y'all. But yeah, again, I'll be here to talk to you all for as long as you want to. But yeah, my conversation, the thing that my hour is up. And so thank you all so much.
I still want to ask Eliza how she took the FaceTime photos, if you'd be willing to explain.
Yes, definitely. Let me pull up there's something that you have to do on your phone.
Okay.
Stop
So let me just